Hi there, warm welcome. You're watching Blueprint Explosive Exclusive and I'm Meghna Deka. Well, it's a strategic wildcard in global geopolitics and world economy. Yes, we are talking about the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, tomorrow, about this time, 6:30 p.m., President Putin is expected to land in India and he will be hosted by Prime Minister in a private dinner. This will be the 17th time that the two leaders are meeting. So what we will be discussing tonight is 1, the message to Trump despite his threats. 2, the future of India's fuel diplomacy with Russia. 3, the perfect recipe for Atmanirbhar Bharat. 4, a defense deal to act as a deterrent. Remember, a deterrence, not a vehicle for war. So will President Putin's India visit be Modi's trump card in geopolitics? Well, that's going to be the question. So let's begin first with a message to President Trump, since this is, after all, the first visit of Putin since the Ukraine war and tariffs. Well, Russia, remember, continues to be India's all-weather ally, traditionally and strategically. Such has been this dosti that President Trump has penalized India with 50% tariffs for buying discounted Russian oil and allegedly fueling Russia's war machine, something which has been refuted by India. But since Trump's stringent sanctions, India's imports of Russian oil have fallen drastically. Let's tell you what this means in terms of trade and energy. Well, first, let's begin with the trade ties. The bilateral trade ties between India and Russia currently stand at a whopping $65.7 billion. And this is targeted to increase to $100 billion by 2030. That's how strategic a partner they are in trade. And when it comes to the Russian oil import, and this is very interesting because we are going to juxtapose what India was buying before the Ukraine war, what India was buying after the Ukraine war, when Russia offered India great discounts. Before the war, it was merely at 2.5% of our total imports, which we were buying from Russia. After Ukraine war, India increased because there was oil which was given to us at a discount by Russia. India increased its Russian oil imports to 35.8% of the total imports. However, right after the sanctions were announced by President Trump, the imports have been coming out. There was a sudden spike which went up the very next month, when it appeared that refineries were trying to shore up their tankers and ensure that they have enough reserve. But in December itself, it is projected to come down to merely 20% of our total imports. So will this be discussed and what will be the way forward is what we are going to ask. Now, the US President Donald Trump has time and again leveled big charges against India. On multiple occasions, he has accused India of funding the Ukraine war by buying Russian oil. But here's a fact check that we must remind President Trump. This is what he has not told you in all the claims that he has been making. Remember, President Trump has claimed that India has fueled the Russian war machine. The fact is that there was no such sanction on Russian oil. There was only a price cap earlier at the G7 and by EU. Earlier, there were no such sanctions. The second claim that President Trump had been making is that India has been punished for buying Russian oil. The fact is, it's China and not India which is the highest importer of Russian oil. China has about 47% of its imports. With Russia, if you see, of Turkey, for example, this comes to about $133 billion of oil that they are buying from Russia. And when it comes to India, it is much, much less compared to this. India stands at 133.4 billion and Turkey, sorry, I'm going to correct that figure for myself. It's $90.3 billion, which is 6%. So as you can see, India is not the highest oil importer of Russian oil. It is China. But China did not face the kind of tariffs that India did. Meanwhile, President Trump has also claimed that this war is Modi's war, that the Ukraine-Russia war is Modi's war. The fact is that India buys oil from traders and not the Russian state. It has nothing to do with the Indian state either. Also, President Trump claims that the path to peace is via Delhi. The fact is that he has been silent on the fact that EU has 30% of Russian PNG that they are buying. China, 30% of Russian PNG is being bought by them. Turkey, 27% of Russian PNG. In that case, why is India being singled out is the question. Also, he has claimed that sanctions on India will end the war. But will it really? Remember, sanctions have already come, tariffs have come, but the fact is that European Union still continues to import Russian crude oil. European Union sanctions exempt US and Canada. EU sanctions exempt Japan as well till 2026, but not India. Let's go across to our panelists so that we can put a perspective into it, and we'll break up the entire show into three large umbrellas. First, we are looking at what is the larger message to Trump, the way forward for India's power future, as well as our energy future. Joining us today on the show, we have Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, a former Indian politician, diplomat, I beg your pardon. Also, Tatiana Kukhareva is joining us, a senior journalist live from Moscow. Tatiana, I'm going to come to you first because you must be hearing a lot of buzz in Russian media as well. What is the likely reset that we expect between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump when it comes to fuel imports? Do you think the imports are likely to increase or decrease after the drastic decline that we've seen this month alone?
Well, look, this summit is obviously a show of just how special the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin is. You know, when you read Indian media, you do see the word dost, you know, that President Putin is referred to as a friend, and the Kremlin has stressed it on multiple occasions that the relationship between the two countries is much deeper and is much more special than many other relationships that Moscow has with many different states, because it is based on a common perspective and a way on a lot of similarities between, you know, how we view the world, how we position ourselves. So, you know, we know that there will be energy deals discussed. We know that the head of Rosatom is flying with the delegation, and that they're bringing a deal to the table on the small modular reactors. There's also going to be security deals discussed, further cooperation in terms of security. And, you know, the relationship between Moscow and New Delhi has already proven incredibly important, not just for Moscow and New Delhi itself, but for the region as well.
Absolutely. Well, many are saying that this could be a game changer as well and realign a lot in geopolitics. But Ambassador Sajanhar, Trump has been using sanctions and tariffs against India to force Putin into a peace deal. Do you think this meeting is going to help or hurt these negotiations for a peace deal?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. You know, in my view, these tariffs really have nothing to do at all with, you know, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, although that is ostensibly made out to be the reason. And you have explained it very beautifully yourself that, you know, China is buying more oil. If it was to do with buying of oil, then China would have been the first candidate for, you know, attracting all these sanctions, or Turkey, or, you know, some of the EU countries themselves. But that is not the case. Mr. Trump was very peeved and personally piqued because he had played a role. He had played a role as far as stopping the mediating the India-Pakistan war. India said no one else was involved. It was only between India and Pakistan that was done. And he thought that you know, put a spanner in the wheel for his getting the Nobel Peace Prize. So that was his personal pique that he was doing it. Otherwise, you know, I don't think that you know, these sanctions are going to affect in any way. The fact that President Putin is here, there is very strong understanding between the two sides. There are so many items on the agenda in terms of taking our relationship forward, whether it is trade, whether it's nuclear energy, defense, space, people to people, mobility agreement. So I think our partnership definitely is getting stronger with the visit of. So it is both, a significant element of the bilateral relationship as also a signaling and messaging to the United States.
Well, absolutely, without doubt about that. In fact, let's also explain to our viewers as to what it really means when it comes to the kind of ties that we have. After all, Russia has time and again been India's biggest defense partner, and that is very, very significant. It is one of the strongest friends and all-weather alliance when it comes to defense deals as well. We have witnessed the might of the Russian S-400 systems, remember, during Operation Sindoor, which helped us to shield our borders. Let's explain to you why they are so very strategic. Well, there you have it on your screens. They are, after all, Russia is India's largest defense partner. In fact, 36% of arms are being imported from Russia. Although many have said, it's important to point out that this has reduced from 2024 when it was actually higher at a larger number, which I had seen, which was 72% between 2010 and 2014. So since 2010-2014, it was 72%. Now it has come down, but it's still a whopping 36% of India's arms imports, which are coming in from Russia. Well, India has also got over 260 Sukhoi Su-30 MKIs and also S-400s defense shields that we were explaining, the prowess which has already been tested, tried and tested in Operation Sindoor. In fact, what we are picking up, and this is the exciting bit for the next-gen Sukhois, there is what we hear, the buzz for a request for proposal, as it is called, a request for proposal from India to Russia for the Sukhoi Su-57s, which are likely. And this is very interesting because many have said the Su-57s are actually the greatest planes made so far. So let me go across to Tatiana on that. What is the buzz that you're hearing? Is there a possibility? Is India and Russia looking towards getting the next-gen Sukhois to India?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here in a place where I would hate to speculate. Look, we'll have to wait and see. But one thing I can tell you that it looks like the form of subjugation. You know, we know Donald Trump, he loves the big kind of loud narratives. And they're always a form of subjugation in a way, you know, they're used as a form of to try and subjugate states, weaker states that would bend to his, narrative. One thing that this visit is going to do is for sure show that both leaders are taking a stand. We'll have to wait and see what exactly is put on the table. Because this, it's a big visit. We've waited for such a visit for a long time.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Tatiana is not giving away anything, holding your cards close to your chest. But, well, we've been hearing the murmurs. That's something that all of us are really looking forward to. But let's also take a look. Since we are talking about the defense partnership between the two nations, one very significant aspect which is going to be at play is the India-Russia Relos Pact. Let's decode what both the nations are bringing to the defense table and how it strengthens India's military deterrence as well. As I had pointed out earlier as well, it is not about fueling a war, but it is about ensuring that a war is stopped with the power of deterrence. What does it really imply? It's about mutual deployment of warships and aircraft. The purpose is for a faster turnaround when it comes during operations. Also, this relos, which is essentially the reciprocal exchange of logistics support, it can send military formation, which means it removes the case-by-case clearances which are required otherwise. Also, it will ensure that there is mutual use of airspace and ports, which of course is going to ensure that there is going to be military presence as well, which expands for both the nations. Then you have the regulation of the dispatch of troops, equipment and logistics, which essentially ensures food, fuel, ammunition for forces. Next graphics is going to be very, very significant for us to understand the Relos Pact, which wouldn't be about fighting wars, and why it is about India's strategic move to ensure that we keep Pakistan and China in check. Why? Well, let's explain. When it comes, for example, to fuel, ammunition and repairs, anywhere and anytime and much faster, because warships can now refuel without returning back to base and then refuel and return. Also, let's move on and tell you the second part is that it means that the aircraft can land, it can refuel and it can redeploy immediately. All damages, and this is very significant, damages can be repaired as well and outside of India, because there's also logistical support which is going to be part of the Relos Act, which is very, very significant. Then let's talk about how there are going to be no diplomatic delays during war. This is the most critical part of this Defense Act, that there will be no delays because aircrafts, warships, the access is already pre-approved. So not every time are you going to go back and forth to get access, to get the approvals, and then send your warships and then send your aircraft. All of that is already now pre-approved. Also, backup bases means that there is going to be greater survivability. For example, now you have alternate ports available. If, let's say, one of the nations is under attack, you have alternate airports. You also get alternate airstrips available to you. Emergency landings are going to be guaranteed under Relos as well. So that's very significant, and that's going to be critical as well. Emergency landings guaranteed in case of a war. Also, let's look at the longer naval reach. This is significant as well, because this will ensure that there are longer patrols for ships, not return to refuel to their home bases and then go, but also it will ensure that they can refuel at one of the friendly ports and then return. So this will ensure a longer space for them as well to patrol longer shorelines. Evacuation crisis response is also going to get much faster, because now civilian evacuations under Relos are going to be much allowed from Russian facilities as well. And deterrence, finally, deterrence effect will be there, because India will no longer run dry or be isolated in case there is a war. Our enemies will know that India can fight much beyond its shorelines as well. But what is most important is what the deal does not signify, which essentially, let's break it down, it does not mean that there will be a logistical support, nor is this a war pact. It's important for us to point that out. Also, it will not ensure automatic military support. It will not promise joint fighting in case of a war. It will also not use foreign troops in case of a war. It does not speak about shared command. It does not speak about permanent stations. Which is why, hopefully today you have understood the importance of President Putin's visit to India and how strategic this is going to be. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sajanhar, as well as Tatiana. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time, but that's one big visit we are going to be watching out very closely right here on Blueprint Exclusive. Short break, don't go anywhere.